Hey everyone. So I think I'm just gonna talk about a few random things here. I'm not really sure exactly what yet, but I guess first thing is just an update on the type 1 diabetes and my insulin over the past, I guess, month and a half or so. I think was since the last video I posted, and it hasn't been great. So I just want to kind of be honest and kind of give updates no matter whether it's good or bad. And I say it hasn't been great. It's gone back to you know, so what I shared in, the first couple weeks of August when I shared my, very low insulin requirements, it's always generally followed by a reversal of that and it getting pretty bad for a while. And I don't understand that fully, but of course, healing comes in waves, and so I'm accepting of that. But it's still every time it still kind of pisses me off. And I will say that 2 week period that I went over in my last video, that's the longest it's ever lasted that long. Usually would only be 4 or 5 days where I would see very low insulin requirements. So I'm really happy that it lasted for 2 weeks. But yeah, it reversed. Not horrible, but I think on average, I took on average maybe it went up to maybe 35 units of insulin every day and on average, I think I had a little over 200 carbs, 230 carbs or so. So that's pretty much back to, normal, maybe a little bit better than what I've been used to for my whole life with type 1 diabetes, but still, it's still disappointing. But again, I'm accepting that that happens, and so I just wanted to share that. It's just upsetting where during that first couple weeks of August, I might have 120 net carbs, and I only needed 15 units of insulin, and then a week or two later, I have the same amount of carbs, and I needed 30 units of insulin, and then it was consistently at around 30 for that same amount of carbs. So, it's one of those things I'm not sure why, other than, there's this, I have felt the energy has been pretty intense the past month and a half. And I've kind of heard it from others too. And I'm, feeling, little aches and pains, and I've certainly felt that, and just kind of a heavy energy. And I feel like that definitely has an impact on insulin sensitivity. I think just most people who aren't diabetic don't know that, maybe they are slightly more insulin resistant during this same time if you're feeling the same energy, but they don't know their body's producing double the amount of insulin that it normally does, right? They don't really, they would just wouldn't know that. So from a type 1 diabetic perspective, we see it right away that we have to take more insulin. So, it could be just something like that. I am curious if there are type 1 diabetics listening to this, if they've noticed anything the past couple months, if they've had to take more or not. Just curious on that. But because yeah, the energy has been pretty dense, pretty heavy for me. Just not feeling great. Not horrible, but just weird aches and pains. My back has been really tight. It's starting to get better now, but just weird. Sometimes you can feel the energy, and just from hearing others, just at least on the spiritual side, it seems to be the case with other people as well. So that's one thing. So that's a quick update there. I guess one thing I did want to say on top of that is I'm not that disappointed because I always go back to early 2023 when the whole mucus thing started. My insulin requirements jumped up to over 100 units every single day. I was taking between 100 and 120 units for same standard amount of carbs between roughly around 200 possibly 300, and taking over 100 units of insulin was insane. But I was so excited during that time. Yeah, like I wasn't upset with that at all. Mainly because I like it was so out of the ordinary that there was no explanation for it. So I felt so strongly that something was occurring. Whatever that was, it made no sense. It's never happened to me in my entire life that I have ever had to take that much of insulin. So for that to happen while seeing this mucus come out, um, to me, it was kind of a confirmation of some sort that something was going on. I don't need to understand what's happening, but something was happening. So whenever this happens, I'm okay with it, but it's still, have to admit it is still upsetting because I just want it to continually go down, and then when it goes down and then jumps right back up, it's pretty frustrating. So that's a quick update on my insulin requirements. Hey, this is actually Keith from the future. It's about a week or so after I made that initial recording that you just listened to. And I forgot about a couple of things that I wanted to actually mention here. It's been about a week, and I've kind of delayed posting this video mainly because I'm nervous about sharing the whole jellyfish incident. It's a little embarrassing, so that's why the delay there. But still, it worked out because I did want to add a couple of things here. And I do want to make a pretty quick follow-up video to go into more detail here, but I just got finished talking about all the, how the insulin requirements kind of increased, and it wasn't feeling too great about that. But there were, and by the way, the past few days, it's gotten much better. But even during the time over the past month and a half that where it wasn't very good, I've I did three just short 2-day water fasts, and all three of them, even though my insulin requirements were higher than I wanted them over the past month and a half, all three of them I did not need to take any insulin on the second day, and that's the quickest that's ever happened. I would say, be prior to this, the quickest I was able to stop, or basically my last shot of insulin during a fast was, I think, a day and a half. So 36 hours into the fast was my last shot of insulin. And that's the quickest I've ever been able to do that and not have to take insulin for the remainder of the fast. And just a quick reminder, or for people who haven't listened to me before, I only take Novolin R insulin, and that insulin is pretty much used up and out of your system. I would say roughly around 8 hours. It could possibly go over that, but 8 hours is pretty much what they say. But normally, I usually have to take around 15 units the first day of a water fast, and then the second day probably around 10 units, and then the third day around 5 units. And then if I go beyond that, I'm usually clear without having to take any insulin, and my blood sugar levels stay around 100 for the rest of the time. So it's really interesting to me that during this period where my insulin requirements were high, I was able to not take insulin starting on the second day of the fast. So that's a plus. And then to go into a little bit more detail, I'll definitely go into more detail in the next video because I have more things I want to share about this. But I just did the third fast, a 2-day fast, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and I only had to take insulin the morning of the first day, and it was only 3 units, and that was it. Did not have to take insulin the remainder of that first day or the second day. Now I did end the fast prior to a full 48 hours. I actually ate eggs maybe 36 hours into the fast on the second day. Didn't take any insulin. My blood sugar stayed around 120, 130 after eating eggs. Plus, I ate a steak maybe an hour later, and still it stayed around 130 for most of the day. I think later in the evening, I decided to eat a meal with carbohydrates. I added maybe 150 carbs, and I took 15 units for that meal, and that was it. So I took 15 units total for 150 carbs, and that's all I needed. So, but that said, if I would have continued with the fast, I'm positive I would not have needed any more insulin for the remainder of however long I wanted to do that fast. So, even with how badly things looked in my mind, at least, even though they weren't really that bad for the past month and a half, that was still pretty amazing to me that I was able to stop needing insulin that quickly into a fast. So that's something I definitely wanted to share. Again, I am going to go into more detail on a follow-up video that I should be posting pretty soon here. But that's that, and now on to the embarrassing jellyfish story. Okay, thanks. So I went to the beach about a month ago, just on my own. Just wanted to kind of get out. I was just doing something for my birthday. So I haven't been to the beach for, I don't know, like 3 years. It's been crazy that I haven't gone to the beach. So, but I went there, just had a hotel for a couple of nights and loved it. I have a very strong connection to water. Water is very healing. So it was very nice to go to the beach and actually just be in the ocean. I honestly felt like could have meditated there for hours. I was just out in the ocean, floating on my back, looking up into the clouds and sun, and it was just this wonderful like the clouds looked like they were just swirling with me in the water. It was a really good experience. I could have stayed there forever. I'm running out of the whole water video, so the videos that I'm showing here are the ones that I recorded. So I figured I'd just do that for this little video. So, like I said, I did that during the day. I on the day of my birthday, that evening, I just went to like a restaurant on the beach and listened to a band play and just kind of hung out there for a couple hours and talked to some locals, and it was fun. And then I left not too late. It was maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and I walked on the beach back to my hotel, and there was nobody on the beach. So hopefully this doesn't sound weird what I did, but I'm walking down the beach. No one is there. It's completely pitch dark, and I decided I wanted to get in the ocean. So I stripped down. Wasn't really thinking. I was planning on just going in with my boxers, but again, nobody was around. I was like, you know what, screw it, and I took everything off and I quickly ran out into the ocean and went pretty deep, and deep enough to where my feet weren't touching. And again, I just floated on my back and just stared up into the stars. And it was seriously a very freeing and wonderful experience just to kind of float out there, pitch black water. There was a little bit of fear, but I not too much. It was interesting. I didn't really think it through. Okay, but I was just floating, staring up into the stars for a good 10 minutes, really relaxed. And then all of a sudden, I get stung by a jellyfish in the worst spot possible. And the I guess the odds of me getting stung by a jellyfish weren't too rare. I guess I should have known that they're it's more likely that they're out and about at nighttime. But the fact that I got stung there and nowhere else. There was a small mark on my upper right thigh. I think that was only because I freaked out and maybe brushed, like as I tried to swim away, I brushed up against it there or something. But my goodness, was that painful. It was horrible. And when that happened, at first it was pretty subtle, and I was like, wait, what is that? And I was like, holy shit. And then the fear comes in because I don't know much about jellyfish, but I assume they're in like there's like pools of jellyfish, and it's not just one single jellyfish. But the water was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, so I'm afraid that I'm going to be swimming through this pool of jellyfish and just continually get stung. But that didn't happen. I was able to swim back and didn't get stung again. Got back, quickly put my my clothes on again. Nobody was around, and the pain once I got back and got my clothes on, the pain was rising. And I'm only saying this because this is kind of in connection of what I'm connecting this to from I guess a spiritual perspective. The pain rose from essentially my root chakra up into my lower gut, up into to my upper gut, and it was a deep pain the whole way up into my solar plexus area. So in my perspective, that is exactly that was just kind of giving me a reminder of what I technically already knew, right? Um, the lower three chakras are very connected. All right, now this physical pain, it physically did that. It went from my root up to my solar plexus and basically stopped there. So before I get into all of that, I'll just explain the rest that happened, which was nothing. But once it got up into my gut, like my whole body was kind of shaking. It was very very painful. Now, and so I couldn't believe that this that this happened. Um, and I don't know if jellyfish have like control over anything, their tentacles, or if they're just kind of like floating around. I have no idea, but it did a number on me. It looked like it had control. Like I don't know how that happened. For it not to hit anything except that spot is crazy to me. But like I said, it did. I won't go into too much detail, but it did. I mean, it leaves marks. It leaves red lines, and so I saw what it did. Now, I will say this. I've never been stung by a jellyfish before, so if I had to imagine what it would feel like to get stung by a jellyfish there, I would have thought it would have been way, way worse than it actually was. Now it was very, very painful, but it kind of went away. By the time it was maybe another half a mile walk to my hotel, by the time I got back to the hotel, the real deep pain was gone. There was still a stinging, but the real deep pain was gone and it was kind of okay. Now the stinging lasted for weeks, um, and the marks lasted for for a while. But like I said, like I would have thought it would to be way way worse than it was. So it wasn't overall. It wasn't that bad, but it was still a very very big shock. So again, do I have to attach some deep spiritual meaning to everything? No, but this it wasn't like I was like that happened and I was like, "Ooh, what does this mean?" I was trying to figure it out. No, it just it gradually came to me over the next couple of days that this is very similar to how I believe my type 1 diabetes developed. Okay, for me, it did start with the root chakra. That is, I don't know if it's 9 years or 7 years, but the root chakra is developed during your childhood, your first 7 or 9 years. I don't really know exactly the timing, but if there's anything that causes you to not feel like you're safe while you're a child, it can have a pretty big impact. And for me, my social anxiety basically showed that I did not feel safe as a child. I'm not saying that I had any huge traumatic experience. I'm not saying that. So but as children, you go through trauma no matter what. It could be by accident or whatever. Even just the being born experience can be traumatic, I'm sure. I have an issue with saying that I had any traumatic experiences because other people have had so much worse than I have that like so I don't feel right saying it, but at the same time, we all experience trauma. We just do. So I know for me personally, there was a safety issue. I know that for certain because it's just not natural for a child to be so afraid to speak, right? To be so afraid to interact with people. So I know that for certain. And the anxiety I felt as a kid was just insane. The pain and once again, I felt it in my gut, in my solar plexus constantly whenever there was any social interaction at all. So that stems from whatever you want to call it, an imbalance of the root chakra that affects the lower three chakras, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra. So that was just a gentle reminder for me, I guess, because I do focus a lot on the solar plexus because that's where I feel the pain. But I tend to need to be kind of hit over the head a lot as far as just kind of reminders that the underlying issue for me is based in the root chakra and the fear that I have. The fear of mainly for me, it is the inability to reach out to anybody, or even simply initiate the conversation. I'm okay with talking to people if they come up to me and talk to me, but for some reason, I can never initiate a conversation. It is practically impossible for me, and I need to work on that just flat out. I needed to do that just a little bit by a little bit, to kind of put myself in those uncomfortable situations, have the ability to work through them, and go from there. So, and this is just my opinion, but specific to type 1 diabetes, it's generally developed when you're a child. I know there's more cases seemingly that are popping up nowadays, in adults, but for the most part, and at least for the majority of history, it is that disease is developed when you're a child. So in my opinion, it makes sense that, this disease, and most likely a majority of all diseases, stem from the root chakra, and the lack of safety based on experiences as a child. And again, specifically type 1 diabetes, the fact that most are diagnosed as a child, I certainly don't see that as just a coincidence at all. So that's just my point of view there. Thanks for listening to the story. Hopefully, again, it's not too weird, but that's that. All right, thanks. Bye.